Realized this was a national emergency that needed the presidential's the presidential office's attention, but I guess I'm wrong. It's that important. War in Ukraine, inflation, the inability for people to buy houses, the ineffectiveness of getting married to actually have stable homes, all of this stuff, secondary to, but what about sports in high school and whatnot in regards to trans people's participation? I'm being facetious mainly because we'll get to it. Anyway, the topics for today. Let's see, what do we got? Right after that, we're going to get into what was going to be the starter, which was going to be Tennessee Republicans expelling 3 members of the State House of Representatives, taking another step toward fascism. We're going to kind of look at a tiny bit of coverage to kind of take a look to see how the right wing seems to be attempting to frame some of the protests in Tennessee. Then Marjorie Taylor Greene showed up at 60 Minutes. We're going to briefly look at that a bit. I'm pretty sure I can watch that on stream without getting in trouble. So we're going to take a look at some highlights from that. Then we have a new story in the ongoing cycle of why people leave the left. This is, I guess, the new one. I want to get out ahead of it and take a look to see what's what. And then it seems like conservatives are really upset about beer and alcohol. So we'll take a look at that if we can get to it, which I think we could. Iowa is going to be expanding its child labor pool, so that's really nice. We'll briefly talk about that. And then Ben Shapiro, I guess reviewed Bernie Sanders' new book. I believe it's okay to be angry at capitalism. I believe was the name. I have not read it yet. I do really want to, but yeah. Let's just get right into the Biden administration. Off the bat, where's the? Is this it? No, this is the right Twitter account. The wrong tweet. Where is it? Lovely. Where is it? Here it is. All right, from the lovely Alejandra Caraballo. Yep. Biden to transgender Americans. Your president has your back. Remarks from the early days of his administration. So that was a fucking lie. Yep. All right. School sports cannot, quote, categorically ban transgender athletes under new Biden proposal. That's I see New York Times doing the Lord's work. It is the first time the administration has substantively weighed in on the charge debate. The proposal gives schools significant leeway to reject the participation of transgender athletes. I wonder why they went with this headline. Funny. It's funny that. Before we get into this, I want to just say, I've heard this been described as a compromise, as a reach across the aisle to conservative Democrats and maybe some moderate centrist conservatives out there who aren't Republican voters. No. I'm sorry, but no. Let me be really, really clear with this one. Biden, you're not going to get credit for this, my guy. I'm sorry to inform you, but you're not getting any credit from this. The right wing will not give you credit for any of this anti-trans stuff. So I don't know why you bother, but we're getting ahead of ourselves. Let's get going. The Biden administration proposed a rule change under Title IX that would prohibit schools for categorically banning transgender students from athletic teams that are consistent with their gender identities. The Biden administration proposed a rule change on Thursday that would forbid schools to enact outright bans on transgender athletes. Is the window open? It is. Okay, cool. Transgender athletes who want to compete on teams that are consistent with their gender identities. But the proposal would also give schools significant leeway and allow them to reject transgender athletes at the highest levels of competition. Under the Department of Education proposal, categorically banning transgender athletes would be a violation of Title IX, which prohibits sex discrimination at educational institutions that receive federal funding. But it would give universities and K through 12 schools the discretion to limit the participation of transgender students if including them could undermine competitive fairness or potentially lead to sports-related injuries, a key part of the debate about transgender athletes in women's sports. What is this? Focus. Let's see. Who should compete in women's sports? Are two almost in. Oh, I can't read it. Well, go fuck yourself, New York Times. Sorry. It is the first time that the administration has substantively weighed in on the highly charged debate. The Department of Education said the proposal was meant to, quote, advance Title IX's long-lasting goal of ensuring equal opportunity in athletics and to offer, quote, much-needed clarity about how public schools, as well as colleges and universities, should navigate a contentious issue. It is certainly not going to close the door on disagreements. Trust me, at the very least, conservative content creators are not going to get off the train of talking about school sports as if they give a shit. The Education Department advised that schools would have to assess the ages of students and the level of the competition, as well as the nature of the sport itself. And the impact may be different, for example, in track versus badminton. The proposal must undergo a period of public comment. Once it is in effect, a senior official with the Education Department said the federal government will be ready to investigate and enforce violations, up to and including withholding federal funding if necessary. Connor McLaren, a transgender field hockey player at her high school in Central Ohio, took two tests on Tuesday. Two tests at school on Thursday. Before hearing the news. It's exhausting, she said, even as she welcomed the proposal, adding, I think it's ridiculous that President Biden needs to step in to tell states that they need to stop bullying trans kids. Her mother, Melissa McLaren, added, it's so exacerbating that we have lawmakers trying to legislate her when all she really wants to do is sing Pitch Perfect on the bus to out-of-town games and throw up after she does too many burpees. That sounds like fun. I'm glad I didn't do sports now. But some transgender athletes, transgender rights advocates, worried about whether the proposal could open the door for future discrimination. The people that are seeking to prohibit, god damn, I can't fucking read today, prohibit trans people from participating would absolutely seek to apply this across the board, says Sasha Bouchard, I'm assuming Bouchard, a senior attorney with Lambda Legal, a LGBTQ civil rights organization. They, quote, would make the same arguments whether we are talking about a 6-year-old playing soccer or someone playing varsity volleyball. Lambda Legal was involved in representing a transgender girl seeking to compete on girls' cross country and track teams in West Virginia, whom the Supreme Court ruled in favor of on Thursday. Miss Bouchard, who is transgender, anticipated that the new Biden administration rule could pave the way for a series of discrimination complaints from parents and families challenging school districts. It would be really helpful to understand how the department is going to investigate those. Conservatives and critics quickly jumped on the news, arguing that the Biden administration was destroying women's sports. Again, they don't care about women's sports. Ask, and you know how I can prove that? Ask any of these conservative people to name you like 10 WNBA players. Just ask them. Even women's Major League Soccer, ask them too. Ask them the last woman-centric sport that they watch. I guarantee you they're either gonna lie or they already have rehearsed like a couple of answers. But certainly, none of these guys ever give a shit, have ever cared about women's sports until this moment, because it's an avenue to attack trans people. Let's see. Good luck. This won't fly in Florida. Manny Diaz Jr., the education commissioner in the state, said in a statement, we will never allow boys to play in girls' sports. We will fight this outreach tooth and nail, and we will stop at nothing to uphold to uphold the protections afforded women under Title IX. Something that something tells me conservatives were not, and the Republican Party specifically, were not in deep favor of for in terms of Title IX. Maybe I'll look that up here. Maybe we'll do that after. Polling that suggests a majority of Americans are opposed to participation by transgender women and girls in women's divisions. As it stands, 20 states is so. I have to ask. People seem to be really upset about the idea of transgender women in women's sports. You know what we never hear about? Transgender men in men's sports. Now, I don't know if the argument is, I'm not sure what the argument here is. Like why that's never talked about or brought up specifically. I'm just kind of curious. I would assume it has something to do with, oh well, a girl, a transgender man is competing in a division where they will have to try harder to beat everybody else, meaning they're fighting an uphill battle. Whereas I guess the argument against trans women in women's sports is that they're fighting a downhill battle. I would guess, but I don't know what that argument would be. Did you see that trans MMA fighter put that female fighter in the hospital with a broken face? I don't watch UFC or MMA, but I'd be interested to see it. Also, I don't know what broken face is. Did they like break their nose or like their what's the it's like right here, I think. It's like if you like it like shatters your fucking solar plexus, is that what it is? I don't know, but no, I have not seen it. Let's see. Those laws will be immediately. Oh, there we go. As it stands, 20 states. Wait, polling suggests. Yeah. As it stands, 20 states have laws on the books that bar transgender students from participating in sports consistent with their gender identities, according to Movement Advancement Project, a think tank that focuses on gay, lesbian, bisexual, and transgender gender parity. Those laws would not be immediately undone by the Biden administration rule, said Dr. Elizabeth Shero, an associate professor of public policy and history at the University of Massachusetts Amherst. Dr. Shero anticipated a new host of legal battles over the interpretation of the rule, as well as new legislation that might seek to, quote, skirt through whatever space and regulation carves out for exclusion. I'd be interested, like, so this, again, this is the thing, like, Biden does this. If this is an appeal to the center, again, you're not going to get credit from almost anybody. It's kind of like you're like pissing everybody off. I don't get what the political impetus for getting involved in this end. The final rule will, quote, stand for as long as the current administration is in office, Dr. Shero said. We could relitigate all of these questions again with a different administration who has a different political agenda at stake. Oh, that's fucking stupid. Oh, wait. Oh, that's not good then. That's fucking dumb. Oh, liberals and Biden, you fucking idiots. The new proposal comes as transgender issues increasingly loom large in sports and in politics, even as the actual number of transgender athletes remains small. But 1.4% of 13 to 17-year-olds and 1.3% of 18 to 24-year-olds identify as transgender compared to 0.5% of all adults, according to a new report last year that found the growing embrace among young people. Wow. So you're telling me the Biden administration came out to issue a update to the Title IV rules to address 1.4 and 1.3% of the population respectively. That's cool. That's really cool. That seems totally within the priorities here. The proposal did not appear to have any immediate effects on elite college sports. The proposed rules acknowledge that the National Collegiate Athletic Association had decided last year to set its rules sport by sport and essentially to follow guidelines set by major national and world governing bodies. The rules vary by sport. World Athletes, the governing body for track and field, for instance, announced last month that transgender women who had gone through male puberty could no longer compete in women's events in international competitions. Okay. So let's like kind of play a bit of I'll say devil's advocate. Should transgender women be allowed to enter into women's athletics in like the Olympics or wherever, whatever this was from. I remember, I think this was from the Olympics. If they went through male puberty, it kind of depends. Because you see, the problem here is going through male puberty will give you a lot of those, I think, advantages that people are concerned with in terms of, a transgender woman's ability to outperform her competition, right? I think that's like a fair concern to have. But here's the thing, and here's the key part of this. We can fix this. And would you like to know how we fix this? It's two ways. One, rigorous testing, and certainly when we talk about kind of the standardization of basically like athletic, what would you call these thresholds, basically? So in one way, an athletic board could say, okay, look, if you went through male puberty as a trans woman, there is a threshold where we don't think it would be fair for you to compete against women who went through a woman's puberty. I think that that's fair. Now, where we draw that threshold, I want to say immediately is arbitrary. Where we draw that is completely arbitrary and decided upon based on nothing but feelings. There are facts that go into those feelings and that enforce some of those feelings, but nonetheless, that line is always going to be arbitrary. Now, the second option is puberty blockers. This is when we say, okay, if from now on, we snap our fingers and trans women are not allowed to participate with biological females in women's sports, going forward, if they went through a men's puberty, then the solution, the way that we address that going forward, is the allowance for, trans youth to get a hold and be allowed to use puberty blockers. That would be the fix here. The problem is that they went through a puberty that will give them a advantage at the very least on the edges after estrogen destroys their body, right? But again, the question belies after that, are any of the people who do not want trans women competing with cis women in these competitive sports, would they allow trans youth to obtain puberty blockers and therefore negate the concern over an advantage from puberty? The answer is no. They are simply not open to the obvious solution that we have to this problem. A lot of times I find I get frustrated with people on the right because we have a solution, we've developed it, we've studied it, we know how to perform this solution to a problem. The biggest one of these being abortion. And yet, a lot of conservatives, a lot of very social conservatives, are not interested in it. They are simply not interested in a solution that that gets them the outcome that they don't like, even though their concern around it has been about fairness. We can solve fairness. We absolutely can. And that's how you know that they're lying when they say that it's about fairness. If it was about fairness, they would allow trans youth to be on puberty blockers so that they didn't gain a advantage after their puberty, and we wouldn't have this conversation. And that's how you know they're dishonest, because they oppose that too. They would rather it be, and this is in multiple states, Tennessee being one of them, I believe, or maybe that was Kentucky. That might have been Kentucky, who passed laws saying that children, minors, youth that are transgender are not allowed, not permitted to seek gender affirming care, one of those being puberty blockers, which means when they get older and want to compete in sports, they won't get to because their state decided that they couldn't take the preemptive action of being on puberty blockers, then wanting to play sports. So keep that in mind. That's how you know they don't care about fairness, about any of this. I just realized my light isn't on. My fun blue light. Anyway. Let's see, track and field. FINA, swimming's world governing body, has essentially prohibited transgender women from the highest levels of women's international competition. The governing body's proposal creates an open category of competition to protect competitive fairness. The move last year came just 3 months after Leah Thomas became the first transgender woman to win a NCAA 3 months. Okay, sorry. Division I swimming championship in the 500-yard women's freestyle. Miss Thomas has said that she hopes to try to qualify for the U.S. Olympic team in 2024, but the FINA ruling would prohibit that. Riley Gaines, who competed against Miss Thomas at the NCAA championships, is among those who argue that the Biden administration proposal would undermine the purpose of Title IX. We want to protect the female category of sport. Well, unfortunately, there is no female category. It's women's category of sport. Female doesn't. That's not all encompassing of all women. Female, first of all, female is sex organ, so that's fair. They can have whatever incorrect opinion they want. That's fine. Dorian Lambelet Coleman, what a name, who competed in track and field internationally during the 1980s and is a professor at Duke Law School, said many aspects of the new rule were an quote, attractive way to reconcile the issues around trans athletes, which span many institutions and levels of sports, from youth recreation to elite competition. Having a one-size-fits-all solution, she said, would not make sense, even if the new proposal puts more of an onus on schools. Each of those institutions weighs fairness and inclusion really differently, she added, and it makes sense to take a more bespoke approach. Okay, so here's the problem with that. Here is the overall problem with this kind of, okay, look, we're not going to do a full ban, but there are basically guardrails that we're going to put up, right? Or guardrails that we're going to allow schools to put up based on their interpretation of fairness and what their interpretation, quite frankly, is on those thresholds we spoke of earlier. So my biggest opposition to this is, from a political standpoint, it's fucking cowardice. And also let's be honest, it's Biden doing his usual tacking to the center, but it's not really the center. He's tacking to the right. Or I think the word is tracking to the right. Sorry. For literally no gain in electoralism at all. He's not going to get anything out of this. He's not going to make people on the left happy. He's not going to make people on the right happy. He's not really going to let people in the center happy. And the reason why nobody's going to be happy after this is twofold. Actually, it's multifold. I don't know how many. I might make more than 2 points. But firstly, I guess it'll be 3. We'll do this in 3 different ways. Conservatives are not going to be happy with the new Biden rule proposed in the Title IX proposal that he made, because conservatives will see this as an ability for a school board to set their thresholds such that there are going to be trans women who are able to participate in cis women's sports, or traditionally cis women's leagues in high school and college. What the rule essentially lays out is a edict to find out and set your own boundaries, depending on school board, depending on county, depending on a lot of other factors. It's basically it's the equivalent of leave it up to the states, but instead it's leaving up to the school boards, leave it up to the communities, leave it up to the localities. So what you are going to inevitably see are, in very blue areas, the threshold's going to be kind of on the lower side. It'll still probably be there, but it will be on the lower side, meaning that trans women will have more of an ability to compete in women's sports than in, let's say, Alabama, where the threshold will basically be at the ground. There will be no threshold for any trans person to ever be able to compete in women's sports, meaning we are essentially going to be separated once again ideologically, meaning that in red states, in red school counties, in red regions of this country, trans women will not be allowed to compete in women's sports. They are simply going to set the threshold so low that nobody can pass under it. Whereas in blue regions, it is going to be, passable, but there will be a cutoff threshold, meaning that inevitably there are going to be some trans women that can compete and some that cannot. And lastly, we have centrists who will be stuck in the middle, and their kids, if they happen to be trans, if they happen to just be whatever, will either A, get outcompeted in their mind because they let this trans woman into the sport, or they won't, and there are going to still be people who are going to say the threshold's too high, the threshold's too high. This will make no one happy. This doesn't make the left happy. This doesn't make the right happy. And centrists are going to be caught as often in the middle, not being able, just wanting some kind of middle ground. But the only middle ground that Biden has created is one where both sides can pick whatever it is that they want. And like I said, it'll be people, it'll be independents, it'll be those who aren't, diehard conservatives or diehard liberals who will get stuck in the middle and be frustrated by both sides, which, by the way, Biden's going to need all the help from the center that he needs, since he's done such a spectacular job in pushing away as many left-leaning voters, at least the ones that are left of his center, behind in his administration. So from an electoral standpoint, this is, I don't know about shooting yourself in the foot, but certainly shooting yourself in the toe, just to kind of make nobody happy and make everybody a little bit more frustrated. So good job, idiot. But the thing that they tell, like at the end of all YouTube videos where they tell you to like click on one of these like things to watch more videos. Yeah, I've been meaning to film one of those. So that's what I was doing. I was just setting it up to